story says that Neanderthals were here on Earth just a few years ago, as late as the 1800s. What if everything we know about human history is wrong? For centuries, scientists believe that Neanderthals vanished nearly 40,000 years ago, wiped out by climate change or replaced by modern humans. They became nothing more than a chapter in history books, a distant ancestor whose time had passed. But what if they never truly disappeared? What if they were still around over the last few hundred years, but we just didn't know where to look? What if one survived, hidden away in the remote wilderness, until just over a century ago? The last Neanderthal to be seen alive. This is not myth or legend. It's fact, and the photos come with it. And on the Anything History channel, we are about to get into the story that you probably never heard before. Whether intentionally hidden from us, or just overlooked by most in the volumes of information out there. It's the true, unsettling story of a wild creature thought to be one of the last Neanderthals to live. Discovered in the late 1800s, the subject was reportedly living wild and naked in the forest in the Caucasus region within the Caucasus Mountains of Russia. This human-like being wasn't like any human the villagers had ever seen. And to make matters more interesting, the being was a female by human description. But she was no ordinary woman. Her story, shrouded in mystery and cruelty, begins deep in the forests. Inside a region long rumored to harbor strange wild creatures known as Almasty, Russia's version of Bigfoot. It was in the mid-1800s, villagers in Abkhazia whispered of a towering, ape-like woman who roamed the woods, naked and untamed. She was said to be covered in thick, reddish hair, her body powerfully muscular, standing at an imposing 6 feet 6 inches. She had no spoken language, only guttural sounds, and seemed more beast than human to those who glimpsed her from the shadows of the trees. The legend caught the attention of a noble merchant, Eji Janaba, who saw an opportunity for spectacle and profit. Whether out of curiosity or greed, he paid local hunters to capture the wild woman. The villagers laid a brutal trap. They got together, forcing her into a pit lined with spikes. Now shackled and restrained, she was dragged from the only home she had ever known and given a name. They called her Zana. Janaba took Zana to his estate, where he imprisoned her in a cage like a wild animal. She was now a creature removed from the innocence of being who nature made her to be, stripped of freedom, and now being gazed at as if she were an extinct animal. She was being forced to live in quarters that she could have never fathomed. This place was not home. She would dig a hole in the ground of the cage to sleep at night. Zana was immensely strong. It was said that she could outrun a horse. Without apparent effort, she could lift a 180-pound sack of flour with one hand and then carry it from the water mill to the village, all uphill. She could effortlessly climb trees to retrieve fruit, and she had large hands that could gather big bunches of grapes, which she loved, all at one time. Zana also liked to roam the forest free at night time, when they would let her out to forage, for their benefit, of course. And on warmer days, Zana would often rest in chilled pools of water alongside water buffaloes. But she was quiet, non-aggressive, even seen as docile. They weren't afraid of her, and so she was now able to move from that cage from time to time. Zana had an aversion to heat and could not abide in a heated room. When given clothes, she shredded them to pieces, preferring to walk naked even during the harshest of winters. People came from miles around to gawk at her, paying Janaba for the chance to see the ape woman of Abkhazia. Over time, the chains loosened. Zana did not try to escape, and eventually, she was granted some reprieve by only being chained to a fence. But Zana was never truly free, nor would she ever be. She was trained to perform menial tasks, taught to do chores, and in essence, becoming little more than a servant. Alcohol was introduced into her life, perhaps to make her more docile than she already was, or perhaps to just get her drunk and make what came next easier for those who abused her. The village men, emboldened by her captivity and her inability to fight back in any meaningful way, raped her. Again and again, Zana bore 6 children from these unknown fathers. Although truthfully, 4 of them can be relatively assured and 2 proven. The first 2 children tragically did not survive. Unable to understand how to care for an infant, Zana took them to a freezing river to wash them, where they succumbed to the cold. The babies, obviously not having inherited their mother's tolerance of cold temperatures, succumbed to hypothermia in the frigid waters. She had no skill or understanding of how to care for infants with more human genetics than she had. After that, the village women saw the process that was happening between Zana and the men, and they knew they had to intervene, taking her children away at birth to raise them properly and with the care that a human baby should have. Unlike their mother, you see here as adults, these children had no excessive hair, no strange features. They learned to speak, they integrated into the society. They lived as normal humans. Two of them, a daughter named Zana and a son named Quit, lived long enough to be photographed. You see here that their existence is proof that whatever Zana was, she was able to biologically mate with humans. Now, after 20 years in captivity, unfortunately, Zana died. She is said to have died in 1890, and the whereabouts of her skeleton is not known, so a forensic examination of her remains is not possible. Her children, and even grandchildren, however, are a different matter. But even in death, her exploitation was not over. After all that happened to her, that was still not enough for some, especially for the greedy. There was still a story to be written, a tale to be told. In modern times, Zana's story resurfaced in the scientific community. Geneticists sought to unravel the mystery of her origins. Dr. Brian Sykes, once a respected researcher, tested the remains of her son, Quit, who died in 1954 and whose father, according to rumor, was Edgy Janaba himself. Dr. Sykes' findings were controversial. He claimed that Zana's DNA was 100% African, but from a lineage unseen in any modern African population. He suggested she was part of a lost branch of humanity, one that had left Africa over 100,000 years ago and evolved separately in the Caucasus Mountains. Some even took this as evidence that she was a relic of an ancient pre-human species, lending fuel to Almasty and Bigfoot myths. But further research refuted these wild claims. A more detailed study in 2021 determined that Zana's ancestry traced to modern East African populations. Scientists speculated that her appearance and behavior might have been due to a rare genetic condition, such as congenital hypertrichosis, sometimes called werewolf syndrome, which causes excessive hair growth and, in some cases, cognitive impairment. Her son's Y-DNA, however, held another surprise. His paternal lineage was linked to the Yamnaya culture, an ancient people known for spreading Indo-European languages, and more curiously, it bore genetic ties to Scotland. How a man carrying Scottish-linked DNA fathered a child with Zana in 19th century Abkhazia remains a mystery. Did they all get it wrong? They at first said she must be a surviving Neanderthal. Then came all the digging to conclude inconclusively. We know humans have a connection to the Neanderthals in some way genetically. In fact, some of us are walking around with as much as 6% or more of Neanderthal DNA. Are the lines blurred here? Zana was no ordinary human or Homo sapien, even though she had human features. Is this the argument of the beard? How much is enough evidence to be called a Neanderthal? I guess that answer is left up to the people making the determination. And they may not exactly know what they are doing, it seems. But regardless, Zana's story is still one of misunderstanding, cruelty, and human prejudice. Was she simply a woman with a genetic disorder, misinterpreted as something otherworldly? Or was she part of a lost lineage, a remnant of an ancient human branch? Or was she a remnant of the Neanderthal that history has been searching for? We may never know the full truth. But what is clear is that Zana was a victim of superstition, of exploitation, and of a world that refused to see her as human until long after she was gone. Sadly, this is a mindset that we can see traces of even in modern times. But Zana's story isn't over. Additional testing and analysis are being performed. Based on those findings, if any, we may be able to add another chapter to Zana's story. She is most likely our best opportunity to glimpse what the Neanderthals actually look like.